He thought she was just another black woman to intimidate. No badge, no power, no consequence. But when Officer Hensley struck Clarissa Monroe across the face during a routine stop, he didn't just assault a driver, he ignited a firestorm that would shake a city, rattle a system, and remind the nation what dignity looks like when it refuses to be silenced. Somebody said. Clarissa Monroe never liked being late. That morning she slipped on a simple grey blazer over a navy blouse, tossed her robe into the back seat, and grabbed a quick coffee from a corner shop off Maple Street. No driver, no security. Just her, the road, and her weathered '09 Camry humming through the sleepy streets of Terrell, Texas. She was halfway down Greenway when she noticed the cruiser 2 cars behind. Lurking, not rushing. She signaled her turn, checked her mirrors. Old habits. Then the lights came alive in her rear view, blue and red flaring like warning shots across the sky. She pulled over smoothly by a gas station, her hands steady at 10 and 2. Through the mirror she caught a glimpse. Young, white, thick build, walking fast. His face already set in a scowl like someone had dared waste his time. She kept her posture calm, eyes forward. The door jerked open before she could lower the window. "You in a rush or something?" the officer barked. Her voice didn't waver. "Good morning, officer. May I ask?" "License and registration," he snapped, cutting her off. His hand hovered near his belt, twitching. Clarissa began narrating her every move. "I'm reaching into my purse now," slowly, but her calm seemed to enrage him more. "Don't move so slow. You think you're funny," he snarled, leaning in. His breath was stale, coffee and resentment. She tried again. "Here's my..." The door was yanked open. She flinched, knuckles whitening on the seat. "Out of the car," he barked. She unbuckled. No protest, just slow, deliberate steps onto the pavement. The sun caught her face, the traffic hissed nearby, and then it came, the slap, sharp, open-handed, fast. The sound cracked across the parking lot like a breaking bone. Her head jerked sideways, blazer slipping off one shoulder. Blood touched her tongue. Gasps followed. A woman screamed. A man swore under his breath. Clarissa didn't touch her cheek, didn't cry, didn't fold. She straightened slowly, blinking the sting away. Her voice was low, even. "You just assaulted a sitting judge of the Supreme Court." For a second, he just stood there, chest rising and falling, the weight of his mistake not quite reaching his brain. "Yeah, right," he scoffed. But he was already wrong. Phones were up, fingers shaking on record buttons. A woman dropped her coffee. A man by the pump muttered, "Oh Lord." Clarissa reached inside her blazer. No rush, no words. She pulled out the badge. Gold, heavy, official. The seal of the state Supreme Court glinted beneath the sun, and just like that, the air changed. The cop's face drained of color. A few people started shouting, but Clarissa didn't move, didn't speak. She just let the badge do what centuries of voices had begged to be believed. And for the first time that morning, Officer Travis Hensley didn't have a thing to say. It wasn't the slap that stunned the crowd. It was the silence that followed, the kind that drapes over a moment like a curtain. Heavy, choking, undeniable. Clarissa Monroe stood still in it, blazer slipping from one shoulder, cheek stinging red where the officer's hand had landed. She didn't stagger, didn't shout. She simply breathed through the pain, straightened her spine, and looked Officer Travis Hensley in the eye. "You just assaulted a sitting judge of the Supreme Court." 9 words. Calm, precise, deadly. A woman holding a breakfast sandwich let it fall to the pavement. Somewhere, a man dropped his keys, and then phones, so many phones, raised like shields, shaking slightly in stunned hands. Hensley blinked once, then twice, as if he could rewind the moment just by denying it air. "Yeah, right," he muttered, stepping back. Clarissa didn't respond. She didn't have to. She reached slowly into the inner pocket of her blazer and pulled out the badge, solid, gold, unmistakable. The seal of the Texas Supreme Court caught the sun and flared. Gasps rippled through the small crowd, forming at the edge of the gas station. A boy barely 16 whispered, "Yo, she's real." A mechanic in oil-stained overalls muttered, "Jesus Christ." A mother pushed her daughter behind her, protective and shaken. But the judge didn't flinch. Even with blood drying on the corner of her lip, Hensley stepped back again. His face changed. Not guilt, not regret, But panic. Real, hollow panic. The kind that blooms when you realize the world is watching, and this time, they're not going to look away. "You okay, ma'am?" someone called out. Clarissa kept her eyes on Hensley, calm, measured, like court. Only this courtroom had concrete instead of marble floors, rusted gas pumps instead of oak benches. She spoke once more, low, firm, surgical. "You escalated without cause. You struck me without warning, and now there are witnesses." Hensley's fingers twitched near his holster. A flash of something dark crossed his eyes. Defensiveness, desperation, maybe fear. But he didn't draw, not with a dozen phones locked on his every breath. The crowd began to shift. A man dialed 911, despite the fact they were 5 blocks from the precinct. A teenage girl mouthed, "Oh my God." Another started live streaming. Clarissa didn't move. Her badge hung like a verdict in the still air. This wasn't just a traffic stop anymore. This was proof of everything people said didn't happen, of everything people swore must be exaggerated. This was a woman, calm, credentialed, lawful, getting slapped by the very system she upheld. And the system had done it in front of witnesses. No turning back now. For a moment, nobody moved. The badge caught the morning sun like it had something to say. Sharp edges, solid weight, the seal of the Texas Supreme Court, gleaming against Clarissa's palm. She held it steady, right below her bruised cheek, where the skin was already darkening. Officer Hensley blinked at it, like it was a weapon. You're not," he started, but the words tangled. Clarissa didn't answer. She didn't need to. The crowd was already answering for her. "Oh hell no," someone muttered near the gas pumps. "Is this real?" a teenager asked. His phone still filming. "She's a damn judge," said the mechanic in the overalls, "and he just hit her." The murmurs turned into noise. Angry, rising. The air thickened like it was holding its breath. Hensley stepped back, hand jerking up to his radio like it might save him. "Dispatch, I need immediate backup at the Shell station corner of Greenway and Cypress. Possible disturbance." He didn't mention that the disturbance was him. Clarissa watched him closely, not with rage, with precision, like she was noting something for the record. A woman holding a toddler stepped forward. He struck her. "I saw it. I was parked right there." Phones were everywhere now, different angles, different hands, all capturing the same truth. Clarissa Monroe, black, blood on her lip, badge in her hand, and Hensley, face blotchy and unsteady, trying to hold authority that had just shattered in his grasp. "You better call your boss, son," the mechanic added grimly. "You done messed up real good." Hensley looked cornered, not by Clarissa, not even by what he'd done, but by the impossible math of who she was, and who he thought she wasn't. Clarissa's voice was soft, not a whisper, a calm thunder. "You assaulted me in front of witnesses. You will answer for that." She didn't shout. She didn't plead. She simply stood with the badge in one hand, and truth in the other. Somewhere down the block, sirens began to rise. Backup was coming, but not for him. The crowd closed in tighter, not threatening, just present, like a wall made of eyes, and evidence, and something that sounded dangerously like justice. Hensley's breath came faster. His fingers trembled slightly. He tried to bark at a teenager to stop filming, but his voice cracked. The boy didn't even flinch. Clarissa kept her feet planted. Her cheek burned. Her jaw ached, but her stance never wavered. She wasn't just standing for herself anymore. She was standing for everyone who never had a badge to hold up. Everyone who knew what it felt like to be seen as less before being seen as anything else. And this time, the world was watching. The black SUV didn't slow. It sliced into the gas station lot like it owned the pavement. The crowd shifted, parting just enough for the doors to burst open. Lieutenant Vernon Reeves stepped out like a storm in a tailored uniform, broad shoulders, salt and pepper hair cropped close, sunglasses ripped off in one swift motion. He scanned the scene once, and locked eyes with her. Clarissa didn't speak. She didn't have to. She turned her head just slightly, letting the rising red welt on her cheek say everything. Reeves stopped cold, his jaw clenched. Something behind his eyes lit up, not surprise, but fury held under tight reins. "Judge Monroe," he said, voice low and clipped. "Are you all right, ma'am?" Clarissa didn't nod, didn't wince. She just let him see, Let him feel the weight of what had happened. Reeves turned like a hammer, swinging. His gaze landed on Hensley, who stood near his cruiser, trying to shrink behind the badge he no longer deserved. What the hell happened here? Reeves asked, too calm to be safe. Hensley stammered. I didn't know who she was. Clarissa's voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. This officer pulled me over without cause. Demanded I exit the vehicle without explaining the reason for the stop. Then struck me across the face before verifying my identity. Gasps rolled through the crowd again. Some people hadn't heard it laid out like that. Not in those exact words. A man's phone beeped nearby, the faint ping of a live stream comment. Another reminder, this wasn't just a local mistake anymore. Reeves didn't blink. You hit her, he asked Hensley quietly, like a judge laying down the last question before a sentence. I didn't know. Hensley started again. You thought that made it acceptable. Silence. Clarissa didn't move. The gold badge still gleamed in her hand like a gavel mid-swing. Reeves stepped forward. One step, then another, close enough that Hensley had to tilt his chin up slightly, just to meet his eyes. Hand over your weapon and badge. Right now. The words didn't rise. They landed. The first crack appeared in Hensley's posture. He blinked, stunned. Lieutenant, you can't be serious. Reeves didn't flinch. You assaulted a Supreme Court judge, Travis. You're lucky this doesn't end with handcuffs. The officer fumbled, unclipped his badge with slow, shaking fingers, then handed over his sidearm like it was burning his hand. Clarissa watched, not with vengeance, but with the kind of disappointment that feels colder than rage. Reeves turned to her again. Medical's on the way. I'm deeply sorry for what happened. It will be handled. Clarissa nodded once, her voice barely above a whisper. See that it is. The bruise deepened by nightfall. Dark plum beneath her eye, edged with the ghost of a handprint. Clarissa sat at her kitchen table in silence, a half-drunk cup of coffee going cold beside a stack of unopened mail. Her robe still hung in the back seat of the Camry. She hadn't touched it since she got home. Outside, the Texas dusk pressed gently against the window pane. Inside, the quiet was loud. Her phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. She didn't check it. The footage was everywhere now. Edited clips, raw angles, TikToks layered with captions like "This is why we protest." And she had the badge. What if she didn't? Her name trended for the first time in her life. #Judge Monroe beneath shaky camera footage that didn't need filters to feel real. She wasn't used to this kind of spotlight. Not like this. Not for existing. Not for surviving. Her email inbox had ballooned. Messages from colleagues. Law school friends she hadn't heard from in years. One judge from Arizona simply wrote, "I'm sick over it, but you stood like granite." A retired nurse from Baltimore said she cried when Clarissa didn't flinch. A paralegal from Detroit just wrote, "Thank you for not backing down." Some wanted interviews, podcasts, commentaries. Others offered legal support, security details, public relations help, but most didn't want anything. They just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for holding the line. Thank you for making it visible. Thank you for being exactly who you were in that moment. Clarissa read each message slowly, not because she had to, but because they felt like small pieces of cloth, stitching something back together inside her. And yet beneath it all, under the outrage, the noise, the viral heat, was a silence she couldn't shake. The silence between the headlines. The stillness of knowing that her bruise was now a symbol. That what had happened would live on screens longer than it would live on her skin. She didn't ask to become a story. She didn't want to be someone's call to action. She had just wanted to get to court. A knock came at the door. Clarissa tensed before standing, moving carefully, her jaw still sore when she turned her head. Through the peephole plainclothes officers. She opened it slowly. "Judge Monroe," one said with a quiet nod. "Just here to check in. Lieutenant Reeves wanted eyes on your place tonight." Clarissa nodded once. "Thank you." As they returned to their unmarked car, she stepped outside for a moment. The breeze was soft. The stars were beginning to pierce the sky. She stood there a long while, hand resting gently on the doorframe. Not afraid. Not proud. Just still. The world was making noise for her, but in that moment, all she needed was quiet. The courthouse steps had never looked like this. Not on a Wednesday. Not in Terrell, Candles flickered in makeshift glass jars. Cardboard signs leaned against knees and lampposts. Justice for all. Dignity isn't earned. We stand with Judge Monroe. Some were scribbled in crayon, others in bold permanent marker. A woman in a choir robe led soft humming near the front. No chants, no yelling, just presence. Clarissa stood behind the tinted glass of a second-floor window watching it build. Word had spread fast, faster than she thought possible. First the footage, then the stills, then the interviews she hadn't given but others had. Witnesses, clerks, gas station staff, and now this. A small gathering, maybe 50 at first, swelling to hundreds by the hour. Teachers, grandmothers, teenagers with earbuds in, lawyers in rolled-up sleeves, people who had seen what happened, and refused to pretend it was just another headline. She hadn't asked for any of it. She hadn't invited anyone. But they came anyway. The plainclothes officer escorting her inside the courthouse whispered, "Ma'am, we can move through the side door if you'd rather avoid the crowd." Clarissa looked at the gathering again, at the soft candlelight against the evening sky, the homemade signs, the people standing because someone had to. "No," she said gently. "I'll walk through." The front doors opened with a soft groan. The hush was instant. A ripple passed through the crowd like wind across water. There she was. Not on a bench, not in a robe. Just Clarissa. Bruised, upright, real. She moved slowly, each step echoing against the courthouse stone, her heels tapping like a metronome, counting off a moment no one wanted to miss. She didn't wave, didn't speak, just nodded once. Then a girl couldn't have been more than 16 broke from the crowd, shy, small, a single candle clutched in both hands, the flame trembling against the wind. She stopped in front of Clarissa, voice barely above a whisper. "You're brave." Clarissa looked at her, really looked. Big eyes, nervous shoulders, hope curled into her posture like a secret. And for the first time since that awful morning, Clarissa's voice softened with something close to warmth. "So are you," she said. The girl blinked fast, nodded, then darted back into the crowd. Clarissa stood still a moment longer, letting it sink in. The vigil, the silence, the eyes watching not to consume, but to see. She didn't feel brave. She felt exposed, tired, worn. But when a woman nearby began to hum again, low and sure, a song that sounded older than the courthouse itself, Clarissa realized something. This wasn't about her anymore. She wasn't the headline. She was the match. And the fire had just started. The courtroom didn't feel like justice. It felt like pressure. Thick, silent, watching pressure. People packed the pews, law students, church elders, mothers with folded arms. Not loud, not restless. Just present, waiting. A camera crew stood in the back, still as statues, while local reporters scribbled notes with the kind of focus reserved for funerals and first verdicts. At the defense table, Officer Travis Hensley looked smaller than anyone remembered. His suit hung off him like borrowed clothes. His face was pale, jaw tight, eyes locked on the wood grain of the table in front of him, like it held the only exit. Clarissa sat straight, hands clasped gently in her lap, flanked by attorneys from the State Judicial Oversight Committee. Her cheek had healed mostly, but the echo of the slap still lingered in the room, like a low, unrelenting hum. Judge Ruth Dillard called the room to order, with a single sharp rap of the gavel. No theatrics, no delay. The prosecution didn't need flair. They had footage, angle after angle. Clarissa stepping out of her car, Hensley shouting. The slap, the way her head turned with the blow, the way she didn't retaliate. The badge, the silence, the phones. It played like a slow-motion confession. Then it was Clarissa's turn. She rose with quiet certainty, took the oath, took the stand. When the prosecutor asked what happened, she didn't dramatize. She didn't embellish. "I was treated as less than human," she said. "Not because I resisted, not because I posed a threat, but because of a story he wrote about me before I ever spoke a word." Her voice didn't waver. "My badge shouldn't be the reason people believe I didn't deserve to be hit," she continued. "My existence should have been enough." In the back row, a woman dabbed her eyes. Near the front, someone whispered, "Amen." Hensley never looked up. When the defense took its turn, the tone shifted. His attorney, a sharp-jawed woman from Dallas, tried to flip the narrative. Officer Hensley feared for his safety, she said, in a potentially volatile encounter. Objection. Clarissa's counsel snapped. Sustained. Judge Dillard replied instantly. Stick to the facts. But there weren't many facts left to twist. The footage was truth. The silence in the courtroom was certainty. When closing arguments ended, the judge didn't wait. She read the verdict aloud, like pulling a stone from a wound. Guilty, on all counts. Battery, abuse of authority, violation of civil rights under color of law. Clarissa didn't smile. She didn't exhale. She simply stood, as steady as she'd been that morning, as steady as the truth. Behind her, someone whispered, "About time." But Clarissa wasn't thinking about time. She was thinking about all the people who never made it to trial, and all the truth that didn't come with footage. The word landed like a closing door. Guilty. No motion. No murmurs. Just stillness. Judge Dillard's voice cut clean through the air. No drama. Just finality. Battery. Abuse of authority. Violation of civil rights under color of law. Guilty. On all counts. Clarissa didn't move, didn't blink. Her hands stayed folded neatly in her lap, the same way they had been since the trial began. She heard someone behind her exhale, sharp, relieved, like a weight had been peeled off their chest. Hensley didn't look up. Not once. He stared at the table, jaw clenched, fingers twisting in his lap, like he still thought there might be an undo button somewhere under the wood grain. There wasn't. The prosecutor gave a small nod in Clarissa's direction. So did her attorney. She nodded back, once. Nothing performative. Just acknowledgement. The kind exchanged between people who understand that justice, when it comes, doesn't always feel like victory. Judge Dillard's gavel fell once. A single knock. Then it was done. Clarissa rose slowly, her back straight, chin steady, her robe still folded at home, still waiting for her return. But she didn't need it. The authority was in her presence now. As she stepped into the courthouse hallway, the doors opened like a release valve. Cameras flashed. Reporters surged forward. Microphones pointed like spears. But the first thing she saw wasn't the media. It was the people. Dozens of them, hundreds now, poured into the courtyard, like a living tide. Teachers, clergy, retired veterans, teens holding handmade signs, parents holding children. All of them standing, not shouting, not chanting, just standing. One sign read, "Truth looks like this." Another, "No more silence." Clarissa paused on the top step. Sunlight brushed her cheek, warm against the fading bruise. She didn't smile, but something inside her softened. This wasn't about her anymore. She was just the spark. The wind did the rest. Reporters called her name, asked for comments, statements, headlines. She stepped up to the microphones, only because she had to, not for spectacle, for clarity. "My name is Judge Clarissa Monroe," she said evenly. "And what happened to me happens to too many people, who don't have a title, or a robe, or a badge to protect them." Flashbulbs clicked, voices quieted. "I am grateful for the support," she continued. "But gratitude is not justice. Justice is a right." She didn't elaborate, didn't linger. She stepped down into the crowd, walking through them like one of them, because she was. And as she moved toward her car, no escort, no motorcade, just her and her keys, people didn't cheer. They nodded. They stepped aside. And somewhere behind her, a girl held up a candle, in broad daylight. Not because it was needed, but because some lights aren't meant to go out. The microphones waited, like mouths, open, eager, lined up in a crooked bouquet on the courthouse steps. Clarissa stood before them without notes. No podium, no script, just her, the verdict still echoing in her bones, and the world watching. Cameras clicked in bursts. Reporters leaned forward. The sun pressed down like a second spotlight. She took one breath, then spoke. "Justice isn't a gift," she said quietly. "It's a right." No shouting, no sweeping gestures. Just 5 words spoken like a stone dropped into still water. The crowd stilled. Reporters blinked, waiting for more. But she didn't elaborate. She let the truth hang, heavy and self-sufficient. Clarissa looked out, not at the cameras, but at the people, past the flashbulbs, to the teenagers with phones, the grandmother in church clothes, the man in the back wiping his eyes without shame. People who had shown up day after day, not because they were paid, but because they were tired of pretending not to see. A few steps back, someone whispered, "Say it again." She didn't. She didn't need to. The moment was already moving, already being clipped, uploaded, shared, captioned. Her voice, calm and controlled, was playing through Bluetooth speakers on sidewalks and in living rooms before she reached the sidewalk. Justice isn't a gift, it's a right. 5 words, already outrunning the slap, already outrunning the silence. Clarissa stepped back from the microphones and into the light. A woman in the crowd pressed her palm over her heart. A man whispered, "That's what strength looks like." She didn't wave, didn't thank them. She just nodded once, gentle, final, and walked down the steps. Her car was waiting where it always had. Same dusty Camry. No security detail, no driver. A candle sat on her windshield. Someone had left it quietly, like a prayer. Clarissa picked it up, rolled it between her fingers. The wax was soft from the sun. She placed it gently in the passenger seat, started the engine, and pulled into traffic like it was any other day. But it wasn't. The moment was moving now, alive in retweets and headlines and group chats. Her face, her voice, that single sentence, already etched into a dozen languages. She hadn't shouted, hadn't marched, hadn't thrown fists. She had stood, and sometimes, standing was the loudest thing a person could do. At a stoplight, she glanced at the phone buzzing in her passenger seat. Messages pouring in. She didn't reach for it. She let it ring, because she knew the message had already been delivered. The letters came in waves. Typed emails, handwritten notes, DMs, some neat and formal. Others scribbled on notebook paper or napkins. Some arrived through the court's mailroom. Some folded into envelopes without return addresses. Clarissa read them all, slowly, deliberately, like they were sacred. A retired truck driver from Idaho wrote, "I've seen a lot in my life. What you did, that took more courage than I've ever had." A college student in Boston wrote, "My dad told me to watch your video. I cried. I didn't know justice could look like you." A girl from Louisiana sent a message that stopped Clarissa's breath for a moment. Just one line. "Because of you, I'm applying to law school." Clarissa closed her laptop after reading that one. Sat still in the quiet of her living room. Her coffee had gone cold again. She didn't reheat it. There was a weight to being seen, not as a judge, not even as a victim, but as a mirror people could finally see themselves in. She hadn't asked to be anyone's symbol. She hadn't wanted to be. She had just refused to be erased. Outside, spring was beginning to reach for the trees. The Texas air was thick with pollen and headlines. News anchors still debated the case, like it hadn't already spoken for itself. Some praised her strength. Others questioned her tone. Clarissa didn't answer any of them. Instead, she wrote back to the girl in Louisiana. 3 sentences. "You don't need permission to be powerful. Just keep showing up. The law needs your voice." Then she sent it, and stared at the blinking cursor, wondering how many other girls had needed to hear it sooner. That afternoon, a plain manila envelope arrived. No name, just a return address in Georgia. Inside, a single photograph. Clarissa standing in front of the courthouse steps, holding her badge, face bruised, eyes steady. On the back, 4 words scrawled in ink. "You reminded me. Thank you." She set it beside the others. Not in a file, on her mantle. It didn't feel like ego. It felt like proof that survival wasn't the end of the story. That somewhere in the crack of a slap, in the glare of a camera, in the steady rise of her voice, something had broken loose. Something more powerful than pain. Resolve. Not the kind that shouts. The kind that builds. Quietly. Daily. Clarissa stood, stretched her arms, and opened the window. The world outside hadn't changed overnight, but it was listening, and maybe, just maybe, it was ready to learn. The wind tugged gently at the hem of her robe. Clarissa stood on the marble steps of the Texas Supreme Court building in Austin, the afternoon sun cutting long shadows across the plaza. Rows of folding chairs filled the square below. A modest crowd gathered for the annual public service ceremony. Usually the speeches were predictable. Tributes to duty, plaques handed out, polite applause. But this year was different. This year they had asked her to speak. Clarissa hadn't wanted to. She'd nearly said no. She wasn't interested in applause or optics. But something in her shifted when she saw the guest list. Students, civil servants, young public defenders barely out of school, people who were trying to believe that what they did still mattered. So she said yes. Now she stood at the podium, no papers in hand, just breath, just truth. "I've been a judge for many years," she began, voice low but firm. "And one thing I've learned is that justice doesn't live in buildings like this." She paused, letting the silence settle. "It doesn't live in marble or in titles or in robes. Justice lives in the choices we make when no one's watching, and in the ones we make when everyone is." The crowd didn't stir. They listened. "It lives in the moments we decide not to look away, when we choose truth over comfort, when we choose to see one another, not as threats or roles but as human." Her eyes swept the front row. A young boy sat with his chin in his hands, wide-eyed. Behind him an older woman stood in quiet reverence, white gloves, Sunday hat, spine straight. Clarissa's voice softened. "I didn't survive that traffic stop because of my title. I survived because I refused to let someone else's story define my worth." The wind caught her robe again. She didn't adjust it. "I won't pretend that one verdict changed everything. It didn't. Real change doesn't crash through the doors. It inches forward. It stumbles, but it keeps moving if we keep standing." She stepped back from the microphone. Not with flair, just enough. The applause started soft, then grew, but she didn't stand in it. She turned and walked down the steps, past the chairs, through the crowd. Some reached for her hand, some just nodded. Some didn't touch her at all. They simply looked at her the way people look at something they believe in. At the edge of the plaza, her same old Camry waited in a visitor's spot. No escort, no fanfare, just her. As she slid into the driver's seat, she glanced at the candle still resting in the cup holder. The one from the courthouse steps, unlit, but never forgotten. Clarissa Monroe didn't drive away from the fight that day. She drove straight into it. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Share it. Talk about it. Stand up when silence feels safer. Judge Clarissa Monroe didn't ask to be a symbol, but now her stand is a spark. Subscribe to Black Roots for more powerful life stories that expose injustice, elevate truth, and honor the voices too often ignored. Because justice isn't a gift, it's a right.